Okay. I don't know we're ready.
Yes, sir.
Are we starting now? Okay. Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dean Trentalis, and I'm the mayor of the city of Fort Lauderdale. And I'm happy to host you and my counterparts across Florida for this important discussion about the dangers of HB 1001 and SB 1134, the anti-diversity in local government bills. We're here to raise the alarm about the dangers of these sweeping preemption bills, which are designed to attack programs and policies that support our diverse communities. They threaten important and popular services our cities offer, and most importantly, they threaten critical economic development tools that our cities count on. Today, you'll hear from 5 local elected leaders, including myself and Mayor Ken Welch of St. Petersburg, about our urgent opposition to these bills and why it's essential that the legislature pause or amend them. SB 1134 will be heard today on the floor of the Florida Senate, and tomorrow in the House. We need lawmakers to act now to narrow. As drafted, HB 1001 and SB 1134 ban and defund a wide swath of local government action related to minority communities. This includes programs supporting women and minority-owned business programs, many cultural festivals and nonprofits, and even support for pride festivals. This bill's target and ban, quote, any official action, unquote, by a local government, directly or indirectly, including but not limited to ordinances, resolutions, rules, regulations, programs, or policies related to diversity, equity, or inclusion. For the bill's sponsors, this means any, quote, training, programming, or activities, unquote, that reference historically protected classes like race, color, sex, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity. The bill's penalties include a broad cause of action, allowing any resident to sue a local government for perceived violations of the law, and also allow for duly elected city and county commissioners to be removed from office for alleged violations. This is a penalty typically reserved for the worst kinds of public corruption. But beyond the legal and governance concerns, we must also talk about the very real economic consequences these bills could have on communities like our own. Fort Lauderdale is a global destination. Our economy depends on tourism, hospitality, small business growth, and the creative energy that comes from welcoming people of every background. When the state sends a message that diversity itself is something to be regulated or restricted, that message travels far beyond Tallahassee. It travels to convention planners, international visitors, major employers, and the entrepreneurs deciding where to invest. And the truth is, perception matters in today's economy. Greater Fort Lauderdale is proud to be one of the most welcoming destinations in the country for the LGBTQ plus residents and visitors. Our region has one of the highest concentrations of same-sex households in the United States. And each year we welcome more than 1.3 million LGBTQ plus visitors in our community. Those visitors support our hotels, our restaurants, shops, and small businesses. They attend our festivals, our arts events, and our conventions. They help sustain thousands of local jobs and contribute to the billions of dollars in economic activity throughout South Florida. Legislation like HB 1001 and SB 1134 risks sending the message that some people are less welcome than others. And when the perception spreads, the economic consequences follows. But it's not just about tourism. The language in these bills could place a wide range of community programs and cultural events at risk, from heritage celebrations to community festivals and educational initiatives that recognize the contributions of our global communities. These are not fringe programs. They are the very things that bring people together. Events celebrating the Caribbean heritage, Hispanic culture, Black history, women's leadership, Pride Month. In fact, in 2 weeks, we're going to be commemorating St. Patrick's Day. That parade would be a goner. And so would so many others that enrich our region and drive economic activity. They fill our hotels. They sustain our restaurants, as well as patronize our small businesses. When you undermine the ability of cities to support these events, you're not just changing policy, you are weakening local economies. Florida and America's success have always come from our openness, our willingness to welcome people from around the world. That is the Florida brand, and that is what Fort Lauderdale stands for. So today we are urging the legislature to slow down, listen to the voices of local communities, and recognize the unintended consequences these bills may create, not only for our residents, but for the economic engines that power cities across America. Up next, we'll hear from Fernandina Beach Commissioner Janice Minshew, followed by Tallahassee Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox. Then we'll hear from Leon County Commissioner David O'Keefe, and finally from St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch. So now I'll pass the microphone over to Fernandina Beach Commissioner Janice Minshew. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Janice Minshew. I'm a city commissioner of the sponsors of House Bill 1101 and SB 1134. I want to focus today specifically on two elements of these bills that raise serious concerns for local officials: the ambiguity of key provisions and the enforcement mechanisms of removal from office and expanded citizen lawsuits. Policy debates are absolutely appropriate, but when legislation introduces unclear standards and then attaches severe penalties to those standards, it creates instability in local governance. One of the central concerns of these bills is ambiguity. The bills use broad terminology related to diversity, equity, and similar concepts, but the boundaries of what is prohibited are not clearly defined. You know, as a local commissioner, I adopt resolutions, proclamations, strategic plans, and community initiatives every year, every meeting. We fund events, we waive fees regularly, and this bill will cause us to have to reconsider how we establish policy going forward while faced with significant preemption of our local autonomy. Removal from office is one of the most serious sanctions that can be imposed on any elected official. And traditionally, removal has been tied to corruption, criminal conduct, or clear ethical violations. These bills would expand that concept into areas where, by interpretation, not misconduct, may be an issue. This is a profound shift, and it changes the standard from intentional wrongdoing to potential policy misjudgment, and this is just really unacceptable. The second major concern I have is about a citizen's right to sue. Expanding private causes of action based on ambiguous statutory standards invites litigation, not to correct clear violations, but to test the boundaries. When the lines are unclear, lawsuits become a method of defining them. This process can take years and cost significant public resources. For us cities, litigation is not an abstract idea. Even unsuccessful lawsuits require legal defense. Taxpayer dollars fund that defense, and in a small city like mine, even a major lawsuit can have a huge budgetary impact. Beyond cost, there is the governance impact. If any action that references broadly defined concepts can trigger a lawsuit, then local officials would avoid to adopt adoptions out of concern. Public meetings become more guarded, advisory discussions become constrained, and the chilling effect is real when the consequences include both removal and litigation. If the legislature intends to prohibit specific practices, then those practices should be clearly and narrowly defined. If there are actions that are plainly impermissible, they should be described with precision. Clear lines protect everybody, the public, the courts, and local officials. But when definitions are broad and penalties are this severe, the result is uncertainty and conflict. Instead of resolving policy disagreements in commission chambers or at the ballot box, disputes shift into courtrooms. Instead of voters holding officials accountable for clear misconduct, removal may hinge on just statutory interpretation. As an elected official serving within the sponsor's district, I urge reconsideration of the ambiguity and the enforcement structure in House Bill 1101 and Senate Bill 1134. At a minimum, clearer definitions and more proportionate remedies should be considered. Local government functions best when the rules are clear, the penalties are fair, and accountability flows from the voters that we serve, not from preemption by the state. So thank you again very much for your time, and we'll go on to the next speaker.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Now I would like to invite Tallahassee Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox to speak to us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. Unfortunately, we're having to spend time dealing with this issue when we should be doing our jobs in local government. But here we are. The House Bill 1001 by Rep. Black that moved through committees last week is deeply concerning from our perspective at the local level. There is broad bipartisan concern about the practical implications of this legislation, particularly how it could affect routine community events, advisory committees, and other everyday civic programming that cities host to bring our neighbors together. Let me be clear. If this legislation were narrowly tailored to employment-related DEI practices, while still a significant preemption of local authority, it would at least be understandable in scope. Cities could evaluate it, adjust policies as needed, and move forward with predictability and stability. But this is not what these bills do. In its current form, it appears considerably broader. It extends well beyond employment practices and reaches into ordinary civic operations at the municipal level. From community celebrations to advisory boards to public engagement initiatives, the language creates uncertainty about what is permissible and what is prohibited. Local governments are on the front lines of serving residents. We manage parks, host cultural events, appoint volunteer advisory committees, create forums for civic participation, and these bills that are drafted risk disrupting these basic functions. Not because cities are acting improperly, but because the language is vague and overbroad. Preemption of this magnitude deserves careful consideration and a clear single focus. Instead, we are faced with a proposal that appears to stretch across multiple policy areas and inject uncertainty into routine governance. For those reasons, we respectfully oppose the bills and urge lawmakers to reconsider its scope and practical impact on communities across our state. It provides for broad prohibition on DEI actions. This bill prohibits counties and municipalities from taking official actions related to DEI, void existing DEI ordinances and policies, ban funding for staffing DEI offices, restrict use of public funds for DEI initiatives, and require grant or contract recipients to certify that funds will not be used for DEI-related materials. Enforcement provisions are weak. The legislation creates penalties for violations, including potential findings of misfeasance as well as malfeasance against local elected officials, establishes a private cause of action for residents to sue, and prohibits local government from recovering attorney fees even if we prevail. The House bill phases out official municipal participation in publicly funded DEI-related events after June 30, 2027, while allowing content-neutral permitting of private events. The Senate bill clarifies allowances for Black history and federally recognized patriotic observances, but that's not enough. That is not enough specificity. Here alone in the city of Tallahassee and Leon County, we have done a disparity study on the economic side to determine where those gaps are to make sure that all vendors get a fair share and contracts get a fair shake on being able to do business here in the city of Tallahassee. We did this disparity study in 2019, and then we updated it again in 2022 for construction, architecture, and engineering. This bill could undo all of those things. This disparity study, which I recommend that this whole thing slow down and a study be done instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, and a study be done to determine what if anything needs to be done. But this particular study provided us with legal defensible evidence of inequities between the availability of minority and women-owned businesses and their actual utilization in public contracting. As a result, the premises of commissioning this was to study for our community, so to develop contracting and procurement opportunities so that we could close that gap and make sure that everyone had a fair shake and a fair opportunity. If this bill passes, this jeopardizes more than 150 minority-owned businesses. And over the past 3 years, between the programs that we have in the city of Tallahassee and Leon County, that equates to more than $35 million. Hear me again, more than 150 contractors and equaling to more than $35 million that this could impact because of this bill alone. So in other words, contracting and procurement can have the like of that could have a significant impact in our communities. It is important to ensure that women and minority-owned businesses get their fair shake and are equitably used for services that we provide. I encourage everyone who has common sense to use it, and let's not find ways to exclude individuals. Let's not find ways to punish public servants who are trying to do the best they can for their local community. Let's keep local voices and local choices in our community. It's already being eroded. This I see as another opportunity to do that. And this just cannot be. So I encourage our sponsors to please slow this process down, think about it again, and let's have some real serious conversations, and let's do some studies to figure out if this is needed or if not. And with that, I will move to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'd now like to invite Leon County Commissioner David O'Keefe. David.
Thank you. And thank you to Mr. Mayor for bringing us together today. My name is David O'Keefe, and I'm the County Commissioner representing District 5 in Leon County. And when I testified before the House Committee regarding this legislation last week, I made a very simple point. Local elected officials are the closest representatives to our neighbors. We have a fundamental duty to represent their values. Even when we disagree on those values, we ought not threaten the removal of duly elected officials from office just for representing the best interests of their communities. When you read the bill, it becomes abundantly clear that HB 1001 is not just a threat to local control or free speech. It's a direct threat to our local economy, our public safety, and our taxpayer resources. Now, I'm deeply concerned about the economic and community impact this bill could have right here in Leon County. Because the language is so overly broad, I'm concerned that it could threaten long-standing, successful programs that our community relies on for safety and economic empowerment. I'm concerned this could jeopardize our joint city-county funding for the Council on the Status of Men and Boys, a program specifically targeted at reducing homicides and non-fatal gun violence in our neighborhoods. Public safety is the bedrock of a strong local economy, and I'm worried this bill could undermine that work. I'm concerned it could impact the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls and the vital community events they support, like the Empowerment Summit, which gives women the tools they need to succeed in the workforce and start local businesses. I'm incredibly concerned about the severe economic impact this could have on cultural festivals that drive tourism and local commerce in our county. And we don't know if they will be eliminated, but this bill puts a target on the backs of major economic drivers like Pride Fest, the Harambe Festival, the Jewish Food Festival, and the Experience Asia Festival. These are events that fill our hotel rooms, they pack our local restaurants, and they support our small business vendors. And threatening to pull support for these events is an attack on our local small business economy. And I'm deeply concerned about what this means for institutions that preserve our history and educate visitors and residents. Our commission proudly supports the Florida Civil Rights Museum, and we regularly support the John G. Riley House Museum right here down the street from the Capitol. And I'm deeply concerned that this legislation can have a chilling effect on our ability to support these vital heritage and tourism sites. This is vague and sweeping language that would also subject local governments to burdensome and costly lawsuits if even one person believes a program or permit violates this law. And as was said, fighting those frivolous lawsuits ultimately diverts precious taxpayer resources away from vital public services like roads, parks, first responders, and even if the government ultimately prevails in court. This is exactly the opposite of how government should function. Instead of passing vague mandates that pit us against each other and threaten local officials with removal from office, the state legislature could be working together with local governments to solve the real, everyday problems our neighbors are facing. We are dealing with a severe affordable housing crisis right now, and we should be partnering with the state to build affordable rental housing so that parents working double shifts, retirees, and young professionals can actually afford to live in the communities they serve. We should be working hand in hand on workforce development, building local apprenticeships, and creating pipelines to high-paying jobs. We should be pooling resources to address the rising cost of living, improve our local infrastructure, and support the small businesses that are the backbone of our economy. And that's the leadership our mutual constituents elected us all to deliver. Businesses want to locate in communities that are vibrant, safe, and welcoming. And if the state forces local governments to abandon community safety programs and threaten festivals and cultural and art events that make our cities destinations, we will all lose. We cannot afford to let vague state mandates jeopardize our local economy, drain our tax dollars in frivolous lawsuits, or defund critical violence prevention programs. We must protect our community's right to invest in the people and programs that we decide make our hometowns thrive. Thank you. And with that, I will pass the microphone over to the Honorable St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch.
Thank you, Commissioner, and to our host, Mayor Trantalis, other local government officials, and our organizers at Equality Florida. Good afternoon. It's an honor to join you all today on behalf of the city of St. Petersburg to discuss this dangerous and undemocratic legislation. I want to echo the concerns shared on this call. This proposed legislation is a serious threat to local governments and directly challenges the constitutional principle of home rule in Florida. It is also the latest attempt by some of the legislature to redefine and demonize the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This legislation is vague and the impacts will be much broader than many may realize. If this legislation were to pass, as my colleagues already covered, it would impede local government's ability to respond to community needs, create operational uncertainty, and weaken the public's trust in government. The unintended consequences from this legislation would be significant. It could impact existing programs that support women and religious communities, and could even restrict, as has been said, celebrations for certain ethnic groups like St. Patrick's Day, not to mention Black heritage, Hispanic heritage, and pride. It may sound ridiculous because it is ridiculous. Rather than address the real issues of housing, affordability, insurance, and resilience, and maybe passing a budget on money on culture wars, and Florida can and must do better. We can't predict all the unintended consequences that could result from this legislation, but we do know that this is the state's latest attempt to continue exerting their authority over local governments. Between the desire to decimate property taxes, which fund our first responders, ongoing financial audits from the state, and this proposed legislation, it's clear that local governments are being targeted. It's also clear these bills are written with the belief that locally elected leaders, like you heard from today, cannot be trusted to govern within the communities that elected them, the communities that we know better than anyone in Tallahassee. St. Pete believes in inclusive progress and a city that works for everyone. Our inclusive policies are neither discriminatory nor symbolic. They are essential tools for effective governance and reflect the will of our local voters. That's what I ran on, inclusive progress. These programs and policies improve public health outcomes. They strengthen our workforce recruitment and retention, enhance public safety, and ensure equitable access to city services. Now, while I acknowledge the legislature's authority to set statewide standards, these bills reach far beyond what is appropriate and directly goes against what our residents have voted for. As Mayor of St. Pete, I want to send a clear message to our residents. We are committed to fighting this legislation, and we will continue to advocate for our community and our priorities. I want to say thank you to everyone joining us today. Together, we will stand firmly in the defense of local self-governance and future based on our community values. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We really appreciate your comments and all the commissioners as well. At this point, I'd ask the commissioners and the mayor to keep themselves unmuted and ask any member of the press who may have questions and to whom that question is being addressed.
Hi, everyone. This is Steve Bosquet at the Sun Sentinel. I'd like to ask a question of Mayor Trantalis, if I may. Thank you all for being here and for bringing focus to this such an important issue. Mayor, I want to ask you about your state senator, and that's Jason Pizzo, who represents much of Fort Lauderdale and the neighboring city of Wilton Manors, who I would say enthusiastically voted for this bill in the Senate Rules Committee a couple of weeks ago. He did so after getting assurances from the sponsor, Senator Clay Yarborough, that Wilton Manors could still provide police protection for the annual Stonewall event, an event with which I'm sure you're very familiar. I just wanted to ask you, Mayor, to comment on Senator Pizzo's support for this legislation when he represents your community.
Thank you for that question. I saw where he had voted for it, and I have to tell you, we are completely disappointed in his vote and his representation of his own district. I attempted to contact him. He refused to respond to my efforts to speak with him about this. He has gone rogue on this issue and was very disappointed. We understand he's completing his term, and honestly, I just don't think he represents his district very well. So we're hopeful that the rest of the Senate and the other senators like Rosalind Osgood, for example, as well as our state representative, who I understand Chip LaMarca also voted against these bills. We're very respectful and appreciative of their efforts to represent the views of our district, but Senator Pizzo clearly has gone off on his own in this regard. Any other questions?
This is Ty Russell with WFLA. I have a question for Mayor Welch. I know that State Rep Rayner has been talking to some of the Republicans who were drafting these bills. They say that she mentioned some things and there were some amendments made. However, it doesn't look like these measures will be killed. They're still making their way through. So, Mayor Welch, have you been successful in speaking to other state reps and state senators in the Pinellas County area to try to gain more amendments onto the bill, or just kill the bills in general?
We're talking to our entire delegation. Had a late night text conversation with Senator Rouson last night. So we're all hands on deck on this, and we'll continue to look at every option we have to either defeat this bill, or if it passes, to fight it.
Does that option include lawsuits if these measures are passed and signed into law?
It's every option we have.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor Welch, Martin Vasola with Axios. I had a question about Pride and related events, community events like that. Do you think this bill would restrict a city from providing in-kind services like police sanitation, or just cash sponsorships, or is it unclear to you?
It is so vaguely written that we don't we're not sure of that. Now, I think the implementation date is January 27th, the last version I saw, January of 2027. So it wouldn't affect this year's Pride, but it is so far ranging that it just depends how risk averse a city or a county wants to be, given their broad definition of DEI.
My question is also for Mayor Welch. Sorry, this is Mark Parker here, but anyone else can answer too if they would like. Actually, two questions. My first is, and I know it's ambiguous, but do you think this legislation would affect community redevelopment areas as far as their operations and what they currently do? And then my second question is similar to one previously posed, and that is, if this is successful, if the legislation becomes law and you know, power is concentrated in Tallahassee, so to speak, as you mentioned, you know, what are the odds of us being able to kind of undo that once we have a new state administration?
So your last question first, we're monitoring it very closely. It depends if the legislation passes or not, what our approach would be. On the CRAs, this is another concern that I have. You know, in Pinellas County, in the city of St. Pete, we created the first CRAs that were based on reducing poverty. So it's based on income. Hopefully that would not be affected by this legislation, but we've seen, again, attempts to preempt our use of CRA dollars in the past as well. So we're monitoring everything closely. I think the CRAs are okay as it relates to this bill. And I'll ask my colleagues if they have any other.
I would say we really don't know, because with the CRA, we have contractors and folks who are doing this work. And if we're not able to continue to use small minority women-owned businesses for CRA projects, then there will be economic impact.
I had one more question for Mayor Trentalis. You mentioned, and your colleagues mentioned, unintended consequences. Do you have any idea what the intended consequences were for a bill like this?
Very good question there, Martin. I think the consequences are quite obvious. It's clear to denigrate the gay community, African American community, any persons of color, women. It's quite targeted at those communities, and it's not just evidence in these bills. The rhetoric over the past several years continues to show a direction that this particular administration and this legislature has followed. So we're not kidding ourselves here, but in trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, they're also going to cancel all kinds of cultural events. I mentioned St. Patrick's Day. CRA was very interesting that was brought up, because clearly those are economic minorities for which the CRAs were intended to help mitigate the impact of the economies. It can go on, and Mayor Welch says how risk averse are we going to go? Because the option of the governor is to remove us from office if we walk down the street in one of these parades. And it's almost getting to the point of absurdity, the extent to which these representatives in Tallahassee are taking their cultural agenda. And in reality, we're just trying to run a city. We're just trying to get affordable housing built. We're trying to help homeless people get off the streets and get back on their feet. We're just trying to, run cities. This stuff that's coming and, kicking us from behind is not helping. And like it's been said, let them help us on these issues. Let them help us on the cost of property insurance, the issues that are really important to people in our communities. Those are the issues that need to be addressed. And because they don't have solutions, or afraid to create solutions, they try to create diversions so that they think that they in fact accomplishing what their purpose is in Tallahassee, when in fact it's just a subterfuge for inaction.
And Mayor, this is Janice Minshew. If I could just make a couple of comments, particularly around the issue of unintended consequences. So the current House bill has some carve-outs for Martin Luther King's birthday, which is January 15th, and for MLK National Holiday, which is the third Monday of January. For the last 2 years, our local Democratic Black Caucus and other Black organizations host an MLK breakfast on the Saturday before. It's not one of the 2 dates that's in the bill, right? So I've been invited twice to come and speak at that. So if next year, if this bill passes, and I get invited to speak in my official capacity at an MLK event on the Saturday, which is not one of the protected dates, am I creating malfeasance? Am I going to be removed from office because I am speaking to a huge part of my local community? I mean, those are the kinds of concerns that we've got. I mean, we're a small city, but we do put on big events. And we waive fees all the time, street closure fees and special event fees for nonprofits. In talking to our senior staff, we also give about $150,000 a year away to local nonprofits who are providing what I consider, safety net functions for our city. In talking to our senior staff, our position is we're just going to stop doing all that. We will take away money, from old people and from poor people and from battered women's shelters, and we'll just stop. And that is not what we want to do, nor that is what our community wants us to do. But we feel like this bill puts up against the wall, and we are not going to we're not going to have any choices, and that's really the unfortunate piece of this.
Commissioner Minshew, to add in, so my community celebrated Black History Month with a parade, and I was one of the grand marshals. So I would have been denied the right to stand on a float and to go down one of the streets in our community, an African-American dominated community, as part of the celebration of Black History Month. So again, to piggyback on your concern about just your breakfast, but not the parade on MLK Day, I mean, we celebrate minorities throughout the year. And to pick a day, I understand the House just passed a bill commemorating October 14th as Charlie Kirk Day. So are we to close the schools and the city hall on that day? It happens to be my birthday too. So am I not allowed to celebrate my birthday that day? I have to pay homage to Charlie Kirk. I mean, the absurdity to which all this is being taken is how Florida gets these reputations for being Florida. So, we have to be more careful about our brand and who we are trying to attract. We are a tourist destination, and how my community and my neighboring communities have been decimated by so many absences from tourists from other countries, including Canada. This season, they're seeing a dearth of tourists from these nations that just don't want to come here anymore because of the rhetoric that they have to confront when they come to our beautiful state.
And we see that too. And, we are also, not as big as y'all, but, we have 2 million tourists a year who come visit Fernandina Beach and our historic downtown. And, Fernandina Beach is actually older than the state of Florida. We celebrated our 200th anniversary last year. We were a Middle Passage slave port, which I think most people don't even know or understand that there were Middle Passage ports in the state of Florida during. So we acknowledge that and we recognize it, and we want people to know and understand what all of that history is. And this bill will, is the state of Florida going to take those signs down that they've got up at, our port, and that talks about these kind of historic monuments? We have a Rosenwald school, which was also a school that was built in the 1930s so that Black children could have good education. we celebrate that. It's on the National Historic Register. Is that going to come off the National Historic Register and the Florida Historic Register? I mean, if you start thinking about what are all the puts and takes of this bill, it just takes you down this dark hole that none of us want to go to, nor do our citizens want us to go to.
And that point is well taken, and we cannot forget the impact on women, because it is Women's History Recognition Month. Does that mean we can't celebrate women? Ain't I a woman? So where does this thing end? So because we're celebrating, we have a great celebration in our community every year, honoring trailblazers and women who've done great things, not only in our community, but in the world. So we can no longer celebrate them, because swooped up into all of this includes the great swath of women that we need to consider as well.
Let's take two more questions. Will Brown?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Brown with WJCT Public Media in Jacksonville. I did want to ask to follow up on Commissioner Williams-Cox's point. The House sponsor of the bill, Representative Dean Black, specifically said that this is about merit. And one of the things that was, and this question is for all five of you, but one of the things that you mentioned, Commissioner Williams-Cox, was about women and minority-owned business contracting opportunities that were essentially created to equalize the playing field. If you would all describe just the importance of those kind of programs to your cities, and in terms of providing equal opportunities, because for so long merit was something that was not considered. People had the skill and the talent, but they did not have the access to those public contracting dollars.
Absolutely. And that is the reason why we felt compelled to complete a disparity study, because you could say it all you want, but once you do the research and find the actual data to back it up, then you have something that you can go to court with to make sure that you're following the letter of the law. So we did the disparity study, as I mentioned, in 2019, and then we updated it in 2022, because we were finding that prime contractors were sometimes using subcontractors who were women or minority-owned businesses. And then once they got the contract, there was a change order to remove them. So what we've done is, with this disparity study, we've done some things to make sure that a more than just an effort is being made to find them, but they're certified. Office of Economic Vitality, make sure that they're certified, and we have a complete list of available vendors, small, minority, and women-owned and veteran-owned businesses. It will get that opportunity. So no longer will we just relying on contractors to go out and say they can't find them. We've found them, and we have them waiting and ready to fill the gap that is needed in our community. And what that does in a community is it keeps the economy going, because everyone has an opportunity now to make a living so that they can pay bills and continue to live in our cities and enjoy the quality of life that we have. So that's what we did to make sure that our Office of Economic Vitality office will be available to share more information regarding that disparity study. But we didn't just do this willy-nilly. We did the research, and we got the facts to support why we're doing what we're doing.
And if I could jump in behind the commissioner, facts are stubborn things, and it's not just about merit, it's about history. And we did the same thing, Commissioner, in St. Petersburg. The records show that we had underrepresentation, historic underrepresentation in our procurement. And so our MWBE program is based on that. But the larger question to me is, how does this bill make the quality of life better in the state of Florida, or what problem is it solving? It's not solving any problems. What it's doing is moving us backwards on progress we've made in our respective communities, progress that our constituents support fully. And now the state is coming in trying to override our values with theirs in a way they couldn't do through the ballot box in any of our communities. They want to override that through the legislature.
And you know that this is not the first year that these bills have been presented. They have been knocked down a couple of times. This is the first time that they've gotten the amount of traction that they've gotten. And I think a lot of that is tied to the culture wars that are going on at the state level and the implications that are going on with the CFO going around telling people that we're wasting money, which we are not. And it's kind of a last ditch effort, I think, to punish those communities that will not toe the line for this these culture wars.
And I'd like to add that this goes beyond controlling the government. This actually controls what private businesses can decide to do in their own hiring that work with governments. This bill requires businesses that get bids and grants from governments, from local governments, to certify that they don't do any diversity in supplying or anything like that. That is not a requirement of government. That is a complete private business decision, which goes well beyond even local control into going against what private capitalist free market businesses want to do.
Colleen Wright, you had your hand up.
Yes, hi. This message is for St. Petersburg Mayor, or this question is for St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch. Mayor, you've got over your shoulder intentional equity as one of your priorities. Should this bill pass, how would you remain committed to that agenda and carry out, that kind of pillar of progress, as you say, or would the threat of a lawsuit or even removal from office force you to stop? How would you see yourself carrying out that priority should this bill pass?
Thanks, Colleen. And that's a good question. I don't know if you were on earlier. We're going to look at every option depending on whether the legislation passes or not. But one thing that I don't think we should do is accept a new definition of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. You've heard me say many times in St. Pete, equity is history, is economic development and opportunity informed by history. And for example, the historic gas plant, which is where the Tampa Bay Rays played. A lot of folks from the outside look at that as an economic development initiative, but they don't know the history that there were 800 people that lived there in a red line community that were promised economic inclusion. And so when you're informed in an equitable way, that's our definition of equity. I just am not going to adopt the legislature's demonized version of how they want to define it. I think that's the first mistake we make, is to accept this new definition of DEI as being discriminatory and prejudiced, which it never was. For a while, you couldn't mention climate change in Tallahassee for a while. But I can tell you Hurricane Helene and Milton kind of proved the point, and there are no folks that don't believe in that very much in Florida anymore. So we're going to stick with what we know equity to mean in St. Pete, and we'll look at all options, Colleen.
Great, thank you. Last question, Mark Parker.
Yeah, and this could be for really anyone, but if I had to pick, I guess the two mayors. But what I'm wondering is, do you think residents deserve some of the blame for lawmakers being emboldened to try to pass this legislation? And I say that because almost everyone has mentioned that the community doesn't want it, but it also seems like the lawmakers wouldn't be advancing it like this if somebody didn't, if their constituents were against it, I guess. So I guess my question is, how do you reconcile that? And, do you think residents deserve some of the blame, so to speak?
To whom are you directing the question?
I'll take a bite.
Okay, Diane.
I do not believe that the residents should be blamed for this. They elected folks to come to Tallahassee to represent them. They sold a bill of goods. And I just believe that the majority of our constituents want us to do whatever we think is necessary to make sure that there's a good quality of life, that they can see themselves in our government, and that it is inclusive, and it is run just like the rest of the world in a diverse, equitable, and inclusive manner. I don't think that anyone sent a legislator to Tallahassee to kill DEI. I just don't believe that. So I don't blame residents for that. Now, what I do blame residents for is not keeping up, because everybody's busy living their lives, and checking their representative. And I think that from what I understand, the Senate sponsor and the House sponsor are all from Duval. So if that is indeed true, then the residents of Duval County, we need you to stand up in a hurry, say something, pull the coattail of your representatives and let them know that they're making Duval look bad, because you will be impacted as well. You have a robust economy that needs to be supported. You have beaches that you need to be. Check your folk and let them know what they're doing is harming you as well.
Well, actually, they're my guys. And they are
Hey,
primarily.
check your people, Commissioner.
I know. Actually, they're my guys. So yes, they're districts. So frankly, both of these legislators are in very carved out conservative districts, and they were elected with big majorities, and we understand that. But when you talk to folks in Nassau County and in the parts of Duval County that they represent, they're talking about development, they're talking about affordability, they're talking about their property taxes. They're not talking about DEI. They're not talking about whether or not we should be in a Black History, we should be in an MLK parade. They're talking about the bread and butter issues that face them every day. My property insurance renewed in February, and it went from $6,000 a year to $13,000 a year. And so I've been scrambling for the last 6 weeks looking for new insurance. And in January, I had dinner with our representatives, and I talked to Senator Yarborough about that very issue. I mean, those are the kind of things that I think our elected representatives need to be dealing with. I understand that we're not as powerful, I guess, as the insurance lobbies, but I believe that our constituents in our counties and in their districts are more interested in bread and butter issues. They are more interested in overdevelopment. We have huge development going on in Nassau County, and the price of homes, the affordability, homelessness, those really bread and butter issues. And again, this is just a diversion for somebody's pleasure, but not I think the general public. So no, I don't think that we should blame them. I think they need to be educated to understand what their representatives are actually doing in Tallahassee versus what they think they ought to be doing.
With that, I want to thank the mayor and commissioners for participating in this forum, and I want to thank all the members of the press who contributed to this, and we want to thank everyone's attention for what needs to be brought to bear in trying to defeat these measures. So thank you, everybody, and let's hope that we are successful at the end of the day.
Yes. Thank you,
you all.
everybody.
Thank you.